What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com for another edition of the UNC Basketball Show. I'm Jacob Turner, joining me as he always does. If you don't know him by now, then you obviously have never watched a YouTube video on our channel before. It's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. It's been a while since we've done a basketball show, AJ. I know I start every podcast when we haven't done one in a while by saying the exact same thing, but it truly has been a while since we've done a basketball show.
No, I did the Tashawn Claude commitment pod here about a week ago, which is still getting a lot of views. And
that one sat, I was ready in the clip for days because we'd heard about it. I think we had it uploaded 3 or 4 days before it came out.
We were ready Sunday night for a Monday commit, but it was put off a little bit because he was waiting for the NCAA to finish all of the paperwork.
Yes, which makes sense.
And the paperwork approving his waiver. Mm-hmm. So they couldn't announce it. They couldn't make it public until the paperwork came in. He got it and Carolina had it. So once they had it, then they can make the announcement. So we were ready. I told you I was ready Monday morning. Figured sometimes 9 o'clock in the morning, these things could happen. So
it can.
I had 1 foot in this bucket, so to speak, the entire time from when I got up Monday morning until when he finally announced, which was Wednesday afternoon, I think it was.
Yes, I believe so. It was the one time I was ready for it too. And
it's like, hey, I got to go get gas, but man, I better be looking at my phone the whole time.
Yeah. I had a tweet ready in my drafts for days, and then when it came out, I was about an hour late to tweeting it because I happened to be in the middle of something, and I was ready for it the whole time. Stepped away from my phone for 45 minutes, and by the time I fired out a tweet, it was breaking news. Oh, I know.
We had football interviews, and I had Dina, I'm headed to Chapel Hill now, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna get ready to hit publish.
Yeah, literally.
She's just sitting there, probably like this, with her finger above the
just ready to let it fly. Yeah, we were ready for that one, man. And again,
he ain't done did it, Andrew.
There's the Dina impersonation. We didn't get one on the football show, which is a little disappointing.
No, I don't overdo it. If I overdo it, then it's no good. It's not effective anymore.
It's a fair point. That's a very fair point. And we're going to talk about Tashawn Claude in a second, but I want to just say something real quick too, AJ. Promo ends on Friday. This show's coming out on Thursday. The promo ends on Friday. 60% off a 1-year subscription at Tar Heel Illustrated. $3.30 a month. That's what it comes out to. That's extremely cheap. I think I don't have to explain why that's cheap. It just is. And it ends on Friday night. Use the promo code KICKOFF2024 to get that awesome deal. Links in the description below. And AJ, I say that because if you were a premium subscriber at TarHeelIllustrated.com, correct me if I'm wrong, you would have known a little bit about that Tashawn Claude commitment before it even happened. Am I wrong? Am I wrong about saying that? I didn't think so.
David Sisk alone is worth the price of a subscription. We don't come out and spoil it for the kids, but there's a way to let people know.
Hint, wink it. Yeah.
And David sometimes does a little bit more than that, but which is fine. And he knew, and he told everybody. He didn't say, hey, this is going to happen. He just didn't. Most people that Datica knows. Datica has got David completely figured out at this point.
It's like a science.
He knows 100% what David means. I think Rob Jones has him figured out as well. So, and quite a few others. David totally spot on with that stuff. There are a ton of official visits coming up here during football season, and David will be locked into all those. And we will, because Kevin Roy's really good. He's one of our photographers. You've shot stuff down the field with Kevin many times. Kevin's really good at finding the basketball recruits.
Yeah.
Because he kind of knows they hang out and getting photos of them hanging out with the regular players, the current players. So we'll have a lot of that. But if you love basketball recruiting, man, David Sisk is the bomb.
Yes, he's fantastic, man. He really is. I can't speak highly enough about him. I think I love his film reviews during the season too, and those are absolutely fantastic as well. And yeah, I mean, it's a great time to sign up. We got 2 full-time people. Lee Wardlaw, Dina's back, so that covers football recruiting with those two just heavy
Brian
on it.
Stuff too.
Yeah,
Brian's handling
too. I mean,
Brian's handling the commitments football stuff, like their season, the results,
that's big time, man.
Stuff like that. So we got 3 people doing football, and I'll dabble in it in the off season. I don't do much during the season. I don't have time, and
then when it comes to basketball, all you need is David. There's a lot less kids, and David's a rock star at it. So you don't need 8 people.
And when he'll tell me about all the different people he's talked to, get information. I'm like, man, that's awesome.
Who doesn't this guy? And I love his podcast.
We need more Venmo money so I can pay him what he's worth.
Exactly. At Tar Heel Illustrated. If you don't want to sign up, you can just shoot us a Venmo. I totally get people. Some people don't want to be opted into.
Yeah, that money goes right to staff. That's all. It goes right to staff. I got to pay people more. It goes right to staff.
Exactly. At Tar Heel Illustrated. Links in the description below for that. So we'd rather you sign up. Make sure you do that before Friday night. But if not, and you want to do something else, you can shoot us a Venmo. Again, all those links are in the description below. Let's talk about Tashawn Claude real quick. Georgia Tech transfer, Goldsboro native, so has connections to North Carolina. Bit of a journeyman a little bit as well. I mean, he's played at different universities before Georgia Tech, just in more immediate places. He was at Western Carolina, had a really good season at Western Carolina for 1 year before he transferred to Georgia Tech. I think he nearly averaged about 20 points at Western. So really good season, which obviously led to an ACC move for him. I don't need to go in depth about that. If you want to learn more about Tashawn Claude and his commitment, you can go listen to AJ's podcast, commitment podcast on him as well. But I think the reason we bring him up real quick is because it signals that the roster is complete. I think before Claude, the roster was complete. But again, this was an opportunity with a kid who got a waiver from the NCAA to play again. And Carolina had roster spots available, had a need for a backup big that has experience, especially when you look at the bench being, no disrespect, but it's Zayden High, who hasn't played much basketball at Carolina, still a work in progress. And it's James Brown, who I think comes in as a project anyway. So you're not looking at a ton of depth behind him anyway. So for me, it makes a ton of sense when somebody like this pops up, who's going to be playing his 5th year of college basketball, who's been around the block, who's been proven and had some really good games at the ACC level. Look no further than his performance against Carolina and Duke last year. If you want to see, go look at his stats from that game. He's proven that he can play at this level, and Clemson as well. There's 3 of the best teams in the league right there. He's proven that he can do it at this level. For me, it makes a ton of sense. But the reason I wanted to bring it up is because for some Carolina fans, it doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of frustration, a lot of negativity surrounding it. I mean, let me just preface this before I kick it to you. I said to you this off camera. I think the reason that a lot of Carolina fans some Carolina fans were frustrated or just not excited about it is because I think they look at it like, why is Carolina bringing in a guy at Georgia Tech who doesn't have these amazing stats to play? And it's like they're kind of looking at it as him coming in and playing 20, 25 minutes a game. When if you go listen to the podcast you did, the commitment podcast, you clearly stated in there, look, guys, I've talked to people in the program. He is coming in to be a rotation option off the bench. And when you look at who he's potentially stepping in front of and 2 extremely young guys, it makes a ton of sense. He's not going to come in and start. So I think the frustration was more coming from people who were looking at it the wrong way of what he brings instead of, hey, this actually makes a lot of sense when you look at why they're really bringing him in. So just talk about that a little bit, about his commitment.
Yeah, we post all of our stuff on our Facebook page now, Tar Heel Illustrated, which, and I'm a little bit more involved there because I think it's fun and we're trying to bring people into our tent, trying to make the tent bigger. And a lot of the comments were, why did they get a 7-footer? We needed a 7-footer. Like you walk into Walmart and there's, a stack of water over here, and there's a stack of 7-footers right there that come in and play 25 minutes in the ACC. They don't really exist in abundance, guys. What they did was they got it running a 6'8" guy who's strong. He's thick. One guy said, boy, he needs to put on weight. I'm like, no, he probably needs to drop a couple of pounds, if anything. He's a guy that's proven he can battle, and that's what they need. They need a guy who can battle. They need a guy who can rebound. They need a guy who can push someone off the block a little bit. They need a guy who's going to throw his body around and can be productive. He was a highly efficient offensive rebounder in the limited minutes he played at Georgia Tech, but there were games in which he played quite a few minutes. You brought up North Carolina when they beat the Tar Heels in Atlanta. Remember, Bainongo went down 4 minutes into the game. And Claude was basically the center the rest of the way. He had to defend Armando. He had to defend Jaylen Washington. He had to defend Withers. He did a solid job against them. And, oh, by the way, Georgia Tech won. Carolina was, 10-0 in the ACC? And that was the game before Duke, and they lost, and RJ tried to do everything he could. Claude was a big I think he went 9-8 that game.
Yeah, he's fantastic for them, yeah.
With 3 block shots. I tracked his numbers in that game, and he scored. He had a 3-point play with 5.5 minutes left to give them an 8-point lead. He blocked a shot with like with 5:04 left. He blocked a shot with 4:37 left. He also blocked a shot he had 3 blocked shots in the last 7.5 minutes of the game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he played. You go look at when they beat Duke in December, he was big in that game, very productive. They go play Clemson on the road and lose in overtime, and he plays 38 minutes and is very productive in that game too. He's not going to put up 30 points a game, but he's getting rebounds and he's a body. Imagine if you know hockey, you got to have a goon out there on the ice sometimes. Certainly in old hockey, I think hockey would be better if there were goons all over the place.
For sure.
We need more Bob Proberts on the ice, Brett Friedlander.
Yeah, I don't know who that is, but yes.
That's a shout out to Brett Friedlander. Look him up. Look up Bob Probert.
I will.
Look him up after
you're watching, look him up too.
Anyway, but he's sort of like that. He gives you that element. There's a lunch pail tucked into his shorts. And he's an offensive rebounder. He's a guy that gets position. I watched a crap load of film on this guy, and he's efficient. He gets the ball around the basket and he squares to the basket. He's not trying to score all contorted and stuff like that. You're not going to toss the ball into him and say, hey, man, get us 20 tonight. But they don't need that. They don't need that at all. They needed someone who could provide them what he got, what he can provide them. He's not James Okonkwo. He's not Justin McCoy. He's a guy that will play more than those guys. And McCoy had some periods where he played some, and I like Justin McCoy. It didn't work out as well there as I thought. Plus, I think other guys were just better at the end of the time. Claude's going to be someone, if you're worried about Jaylen Washington's fouls, thank your lucky stars you got Tashawn Claude at some point before Christmas. Because Jay Wash, until he shows that he's not a high-volume foul committer, you got to have another guy there. And I think after a whole summer of team practices, team workouts, things like that, they realized that, okay, when this kid became available, we got to grab him. I don't think that they were actively looking for anybody because the portal had pretty much dried up and they were pretty solid with what they had. And if this kid didn't become available, Hubert would be very confident moving forward with the roster that he had. But adding this guy is a no-brainer. He's a senior, or he's a last year. He doesn't affect recruiting at all. He's not taking his spot away from anybody that's going to upset the room or anything like that. He's a part that's needed, and there's going to be a couple of times during the course of the year where Carolina fans are going to be like, man, thank goodness this guy came available. He's going to be that kind of player. Not a time you're going to go through a stretch of games where he's not really noticed that much, which is fine. But there are going to be times where you need to notice him, and he's going to be there. So I think it was a very valuable pickup.
Yeah, no, I completely get it. And I think that's again, go listen to AJ's commitment pod, because the insight you offer in that, I think is fantastic. And it's well sourced because of who you're talking to and who you're getting that information from. So we're not going to spend another 30 minutes rehashing that, because AJ runs through, you get a ton of information in that commitment pod. So go listen to that too, if you want a little bit more information on what he brings and a little more in depth of like why Carolina's looking to bring him in. But again, I think you hit the nail on the head there, AJ. It makes a lot of sense when you understand how they're planning on using him and you look at it from he's not some All-American, why are we bringing him in perspective. It's sometimes you have to, rosters are built in different ways. You can't just have a bunch of All-Americans running around everywhere, especially when you look at the roster build that Carolina already has. So yeah, makes a ton of sense. We talked about the roster being finalized. So let's hit on, some guys that we'll call them summer reports, because there are a few guys that have just been getting some glaring and really exciting and good reviews from what you've heard from inside the program and David's heard from other sources about kind of what kind of summers they are having. And I want to let's start with two of the new guys, Ian Jackson, Tyson. Ian Jackson, really good summer from what we've heard. Had a really good camp. He went to the Damian Lillard camp earlier this summer. That's the same one Caleb Love went to a few years back. And just the reviews that he's gotten from not only, pickup games and from that camp is that he's looking really, really good. I don't think anybody's necessarily surprised by that when you look at the talent that he brings. But again, when you can hear that from other sources, especially from inside the program, when they're running these pickup games and having these summer games against college level or, professional players and some of the guys that come back from Carolina, that is a huge bonus. And, you can also kind of say, okay, there's no need for this to be said unless it's true, because it's not like we're seeing this stuff and it's readily available. You can't go watch game tape of Ian Jackson from this summer necessarily. You can see some highlights and some stuff from camps, but this is stuff from people that have seen him and followed him around and been there all summer. So that's a big positive. And The next guy, not a true freshman in Ian Jackson, but Cade Tyson, the transfer. Man, the reviews out of him are fantastic as well. I think Carolina posted a clip on their socials last week, maybe, of Cade Tyson, I think, doing something that was really impressive to see. And maybe hitting a three.
Hitting a three and running the floor, finishing at the rim.
That's what it was. So that was a little glimpse into kind of the summer that he's having. But from everything we've heard about him as well, another guy that's having a really, really impressive summer. So we'll focus on those two guys first, because there's other two guys that have had some really, really good report card reviews this summer as well. But we'll start with those guys because they're new to the program.
Well, I'll start with Tyson first. I told everybody when he committed that he's not just a jump shooter. He's a put the ball on the floor, get into the lane kind of guy. He can draw some fouls. He can get to the rim. He can finish. He can play in the open court. He's really, really good, and he's going to help this team a lot. And I think he'll probably start. In fact, I can't remember who did it. I fly through stuff so fast, especially right now because fall camp is eating me alive, leading up to the football season, that I don't remember who posts everything. But there was a ranking of transfers in the ACC in basketball I saw the other day, and he was number one.
Yep.
And that has changed because of reports that are coming out and just chatter. The chatter's so positive about him. He's got sort of some killer in him. He's got a little bit of foot on throat in him. And that's what they need. Cormac Ryan had that. Brady Manick had that. Harrison Ingram had that. And you see how much mileage they got out of having that layer that not every player has. And I think that that's great that this team's going to have some of that from him this next year. As far as Ian Jackson goes, and I don't know 100% what Ian's role is going to be, and I don't think Hubert does. I don't think we'll fit. And by the way, Hubert hates the term role, so we'll try to steer away from that. But we won't know how Ian's going to fully fit in until they get past the first few weeks of the season at least, and maybe even Christmas. Christmas is often a barometer for me. It used to be January, now it's Christmas because there's often a conference game, before or right at the beginning of January, and there's already one in early December. But obviously, Ian's talented enough to help them. We've heard that his perimeter shot's been better than expected, and that was something that was a huge point of emphasis in college. In fact, David did a full piece on him talking to his high school coach about a year ago about almost the desperate need to improve the perimeter shot because it wasn't very good. So he's made progress there. Drake Powell, you didn't bring him up, but Drake Powell's had a really good summer, done some really good stuff. Seth Trimble had an excellent summer. Seth's got a clear head too. He hit the portal and then came back, and sometimes that's the best thing that can happen to somebody. I'm not saying that specifically, but something that happens that kind of clears your mind. He's here. Seth is in Chapel Hill. This is where he's going to finish it. There's no thoughts of anywhere else. There's no worry about certain things. He's dialed in doing what he has to do and being the best version of himself for this team. And he's a really smart guy. He's a very dedicated guy. He was the most emotional player in the locker room after the loss to Alabama. You can go on our channel right now and look at the interview with him. He's fighting it back. Sometimes he didn't always fight it back. Very emotional kid, very passionate about winning for this program. And he had that weird flirtation. I say weird because I know he wasn't comfortable when he went in the portal, didn't really want to leave, but realized how much he wanted to be there by coming back. And I think that's great. You're going to get a consistent, solid plus version of him all year. And he's had that kind of offseason. And I'm not basing it on the dunk over Jaime Jaquez, who, by the way, I loved watching Jaime.
Yeah, it was an impressive dunk, but it's not all based.
It was impressive. And we know Trimble can do that, but can he do the other things? Can he feed people from the wing? Can he play a little bit of point? If he's on the ball and he ends up at the top, can he run an offense? I think he can do those things. Can he hit the three? Well, he was 13 for 31 last year, small sample size, but that's 41%. People say, Trimble's got to learn how to hit the three. No, he hit the three last year. I saw him in warmups a lot last year. In fact, a couple of times, and I think one of the games you and I did, you did a three things with me after the season. We started doing them on the score tables.
Yeah.
And one time, I know it happened with Chelsea a couple of times. I think once with you. Seth's out there working on his perimeter shooting. while we're doing three things. You can hear the ball bouncing some in the video, and he's right there working on it after the game. This is an hour and a half after the game. He's still in his game shorts, and he's working on his perimeter shooting. So everything I've heard and everything David's heard, what we have heard coming out of the program all off season has been extremely positive. There have been no negatives. Mm-hmm. If there is a negative, maybe it's that one of the reasons you bring in Claude is because Zayden High's still in a process, very much in a process that's going to take some time. Otherwise, and I wouldn't even consider that a negative. Everyone's got their own timetable. So absolutely. That's Zayden's timetable. He'll find his process will reach the next stage at some point. And I think he'll be a pretty solid player. So very positive things about the basketball team. And when I envision what this group can be, dude, they have a chance to be so fun. So fun. Electric, high scoring, a lot of guys that could come into the game without much of a drop off. I think they have a better bench than they've had.
Agreed.
If the chemistry is there, and if RJ doesn't have this weird fifth year slump that no one's anticipating, but sometimes happens to guys.
It does happen, yeah.
And there are no injuries. This is a really, really good team that I think is being undervalued right now nationally.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And there's so many reasons to be, excited about this team when you look at the roster build, and Jaylen Washington too. I think there's been a lot of questions about him, and from all the reports, like we've talked about with these guys, from a lot of the reports we've seen this summer about him, bigger, stronger, ready to play more minutes. It is another guy that's had a really good summer.
What am I doing right now?
Yeah, hitting the weights, man. Hitting the weights, man.
Yeah,
and he needs to. I mean, again, he's a guy that. I think the skill set has always been something Carolina coaches and fans really have been excited about. But yeah, man. But I think you talked about it a second ago with Seth, right? Or excuse me, with Zayden High. Everybody's process is different, right?
Yeah.
And what people maybe have forgotten about now because it was a few years ago and because he's coming into his third season at Carolina. He's a guy who's coming off some big injuries in high school, and he was slow to get back going and get fully cleared even during his freshman season, hence why you didn't see a ton of him. And then last year, when you consider who he's played behind the last few years in Armando Bacot, I don't need to speak on how good of a player he was for Carolina. There was always going to be limited opportunities in that respect, but I always go back to this, AJ. This is when I started to believe, okay, I think he's figuring it out now because the intangibles and skills were always there. He fits what you want to do in modern day basketball for a five very well with his ability to step out, his ability to dribble the ball, and his ability to post you up. But I keep going back to there was a couple times we saw this, but in particular, I was sitting courtside at the Duke game in Cameron. Carolina just blitzed Duke. Duke really, was a little more interested in the second half, but Carolina won that game and was always the better team. I think it was the first half. Jaylen Washington, that putback dunk he had where he just went up so aggressively and so quick and with so much strength and explosiveness just to put that dunk back. And that wasn't the first time we've seen it. The reason we saw it multiple times last year, but the reason that one sticks out in my head is because it was on the biggest stage. It's at Duke. Yeah. Carolina versus Duke, Cameron Indoor. Nationally televised games, millions of people watching it, and he's doing it against that team, not just doing it against other teams in the ACC. That showed me okay, the physicality that we've needed to see, I'm seeing it there. I'm seeing it in glimpses. The explosiveness, I'm seeing it a little bit more there. But also, AJ, the attitude of you can't mess with me, because not only did he dunk it like he did, AJ, he turned around and flexed a little bit. That's what people I think have been waiting to see from Jaylen Washington, and we saw it in Spurs last year. So really positive that he's getting rave reviews this summer as well, because he's going to be very integral to what Carolina does when you look at just some of the inexperience that they're going to have down low. Again, Claude brings a little experience. There's some other guys down there that have shown they can do some nice things for Carolina. Tyson brings a lot of experience, but again, Jaylen Washington is going to be a key member of this team, and from what we're hearing, there's no reason to believe that he's not going to have a really positive season next year for Carolina.
I've got a new term for you for this season, and it's totally Jaylen Washington driven. And I thought about it before you started talking, and then I'm remembering exactly frame by frame what we saw with the play you're referring to in the Duke game. He's got a lot of scream in his game.
Yeah.
there's a lot of scream there, and it's legitimate scream. What's wild is he's a very soft-spoken dude. Mm-hmm. And when you talk to him, he got better. Like, he gave fuller answers the year went on, but he doesn't. There's nothing brash in the way he carries himself personally.
No, not at all.
To you, coaches love guys like that because they don't give away anything, basically. But he's very confident, extremely confident. And I think the confidence in his game was ahead of what we saw on the floor sometimes. And that's okay, because he's thinking of himself as the guy he's going to eventually be. And he just knows he's in a process. His play and his finishing around the basket increasingly got better throughout the year. And I've talked about this on a couple of podcasts before, and I'll say it again very quickly. I had a conversation with him late in the season about his ability to roll to the basket, catch the ball, and go up strong and finish. One-handed or two-handed, and always with a screen, and sometimes even a flex. Mm-hmm. And he said that was so huge in his development last year that it might be something that's an afterthought to average fans. But if you're setting a screen, you got to roll well to the basket, but you have to be ready for the ball and ready to catch the ball and then go up and do something with it when you do. That takes a lot of time. That's time he didn't have through those years of the injuries. That's time he maybe wasn't comfortable when he did have it after coming back from the injury. So he's going through that process in February and March of last season that maybe he would have gone through a couple of years earlier in his developmental process. And it's just clicking now. And I think all those things added up have placed him in a position where you could see rapid growth. And now we're going to see him have to deal with 25, 28 minutes a game. So you're going to see some warts in the game earlier that he's going to naturally clean up as the season goes on. He has proven since he arrived and since he started playing that he can self-fix things. He can improve on things he's not doing very well and get better and better and better. And I think you're going to see that from him this year. I would not be surprised if he's one of those guys that ends up having a much better year than what's being projected, because he's got skills. You mentioned that a few minutes ago. He is highly skilled. He can 100%. Shoot. He's got great fingertips. He's got a pretty good mind for the game, so he's fairly economical with his movement, especially now that he's really comfortable. Screen, cut, catch, go up and score with defense on you. He's got a lot of talent, man. He was a top 25 guy before all the injuries. Yeah. So I think we started to see that top 25 guy coming back at times last year.
Yeah, I think he arguably fits the style that Hubert ultimately wants to play better than someone like Armando did. And again, I'm not saying he's going to end up being better Armando than Armando wasn't a great player. It's just Armando was a guy that was going to post you up and he was going to grab boards, and he wasn't really somebody who was going to step out and take you off the dribble. And maybe, he wasn't someone you felt like you had to guard everywhere. But I think someone like Jaylen, because of his ability to shoot the outside shot and because of the comfort he has with the ball in his hands, and he can put it on the floor a little bit better than Armando could. I think that fits maybe what Carolina and Hubert ultimately wants to do a little bit better, but it's about him fulfilling that potential and becoming as integral to what this team and this program needs that Armando was able to get to. Again, I'm not comparing the two, but I do think that's something to bring up.
And you're right. Putting the ball on the floor and creating a little jump shot for himself. He reminds me of Bryce Johnson. Yes. And very similar to Bryce, lots of length. So he can get a shot off that cannot be contended. Now, going back to the screen part, he's got a lot of scream in his game, but a lot of it's post-play stuff. Mm-hmm. He needs a little bit more scream in his game pre-play before the sequence occurs. And that's one of the things that has been a point of emphasis this offseason. If the post scream is accompanied by a pre-sequence scream, I think people understand what I'm saying. You're talking about a guy who has a potential to post some pretty impressive numbers. And again, another reason why I think some people are very high on the Tar Heels. Very high. I think the general consensus, the narrative nationally, anywhere from 8 to 14. Mm-hmm. But there are some people that can envision this thing laying out where they're higher than that. Mm-hmm. They're higher. I'm not going to say it's a national championship team. We have no idea until we watch it.
It's too early.
I know, but I'm going to make a point because I made this point in a podcast back in the spring, a Daily Drop or something. half the national champions in the last 10, 11 years were no bigger than Carolina is now.
That's a fair point. It's a fair point. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think
except Virginia had some length, but they didn't get anything from that length. Jack Salt, come on.
Yeah, it wasn't. You weren't. Yeah, the production level wasn't there. The talent maybe level wasn't there, and the skill set wasn't there. With
look at Baylor.
Carolina
look
has.
At Baylor in what was it, 20, 21? Look at Baylor in 21. Go watch the starting lineup introduction, and then watch the game enough where the first 3 subs come in, and then get back to me.
Yeah, you're 100% right, and that kind of translates into the last thing I want to talk about, which is you brought up a good point, and I got to preface this because I'm going to make a comparison here that's going to make it sound like I'm suggesting the Carolina football team is going to win a national championship, and I am not saying that. Trust me, I'm not saying that.
I don't think anybody's going to take that.
No, but yeah, you know how stuff goes on social media. You just never know. You made a good point off camera of like when you look at the roster build kind of both programs in a lot of ways. Basketball is a little bit similar to football in the respect of there are a lot of older guys on this roster, a lot of experience on this roster, a lot of guys that have either been around the program for a while or have been around the program for enough time and played enough minutes that you kind of know what you're going to get from them and you expect their games to improve. Like Elliot Cadeau, I would put in that bracket of like, hasn't been around the program for a ton of time, but he played a lot last year and was a really integral player for Carolina. He's back. We're not even really talking about RJ Davis, who behind Zach Edey was the national player of the year last year. ACC player of the year. I mean, we're not even really spending time talking about him because it's like, yeah, well, you know what you're getting out of RJ. There is a lot of experience coming back for North Carolina across the board, whether it's off the bench or, starting for Carolina, and not to mention some really talented freshmen. So that roster build and dynamic right there, I think, is what gives us and gives you the confidence based on what you're saying of like, hey, not only do I think Carolina can be really good, a lot of other people think Carolina can be really good this year. And there are tangible things that you can look at on paper and look at from game film over the last 2, 3, 4, going back 4 seasons for RJ Davis and say, man, like, we know what Carolina knows what it's probably going to get from these guys. Those games could improve. You got a lot of talent coming in. You got some guys that, Jaylen Washington, maybe still TBD, but still the skill sets are there and the tangible things are there. And there's guys behind him that can play and do some nice things. So it's not all going to be on him, that you can confidently say that, hey, man, I really think this team's got the potential to do something here. You're not guaranteeing they're going to win anything, but there is no reason to believe Carolina shouldn't have another really, really good season. Even better than what they had last year, because ultimately they did end up underachieving a little bit in the postseason. So yeah, I mean, the roster build alone, I think, should get a lot of people excited, because when you look at it, man, there's just a lot of guys that have a lot of know-how and have a lot of experience playing Carolina basketball at Carolina. Oh, and they're really talented too, because, you can't really do much if there's not talent there.
I guess they underachieve if RJ's 1 for 9 and 9 from 3, then they're in a regional final against Clemson. Now they have lost at home to Clemson, but I would have given them a pretty fair chance of beating Clemson. And then again to the Final Four, and they would have played. Who did Alabama play? UConn?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No. They played Purdue.
Did they?
State
look that up. I'll look it up.
Anyway, I would have given them a fair shot. They underachieved because they lost a game that people didn't think they were going to lose, and they didn't play well. So 0 for 9 is underachieving as opposed to 1 for 9, which still would have been underachieving from a personal standpoint. But yeah, I don't want to go far into that yet. I think I said a lot already about that they can be a very, very good team. I can envision everything kind of coming together where they play a different style. I can see them pressuring more defensively with this group, creating some easy scoring opportunities. I can see a lot of things in that front. I can see the 5 out every once in a while with Jaylen when he's the 5. I can see Jaylen playing a little 4 and on the court with Lubin at the same time. You look at the options at 4 when Tyson told us when we talked to him that it was more I think I did that interview. David may have done one. I did one too, where he said, he's told he's going to play the 3, but the 4 is not out of the realm. Let's not forget there's Jalen Withers in the mix here, but who is 6'9" and can jump through the gym and is physically strong. He's also a rugged dude. He's a back alley guy. You like to have back alley guys, and Jalen Withers has all that. And for as poorly as he shot last year, 2 years ago, with a lot of shot attempts from the perimeter. He shot 40%, 41% at Louisville from the perimeter. So maybe that returns or in between where he was this past year and that, and he's in that year, he's in the low mid 30s at the worst. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of things to like about this whole group. There are a lot of guys that I think can have their moments, or it's like, okay, right now it's the Jalen Withers stretch. Okay, right now it's the Van Allen Lubin stretch. Right now it's the Cade Tyson stretch. And then intertwined is always going to be the RJ Davis stretch. I think you're going to see more scoring from Elliot Cadeau. You're going to have the Jay Wash stretch. You're going to have guys like Claude that could come off the bench and help him. And I haven't even mentioned Ian Jackson or Drake Powell yet. I think that's the kind of team they're going to be. Scouting and preparing for North Carolina, well, we take away this and that, we should be able to beat the Tar Heels. No. I think they have a lot of answers. I think that's what this team's going to be. They're going to have a lot of different dudes finishing second in scoring in games. I'm going to say that just because it's hard to imagine RJ not leading him in scoring a lot. But he might not have the need to score as much as he did last year, because I felt like there were times last year he had to bail out possessions.
Yes.
It was a struggle getting Armando the ball. Sometimes it was a little stagnant offensively. This is the kind of group that, hell, you can just run all kinds of stuff, a lot of freelance with this group, and be able to get some shots because there's going to be a lot of skill on this team.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. I think you're absolutely right about that. Last thing, because we're not going to go too long on the show, but I just wanted to throw this in there as well. Maui bracket did come out. Yeah. On Tuesday. We were putting this out on Thursday, but it came out on Tuesday. Just wanted to throw that in there and throw that in the mix. We should be getting the ACC schedule, league schedule, sooner rather than later too. So, that'll be out before we know it as well. But just an interesting one, potential for, like I tweeted it, retweeted it and kind of said that potential for that UConn matchup in the final is really juicy, but there's a lot of good teams in that thing. So it's going to be hard for Carolina to get there in the first place, but they do open up with Dayton, I believe, in that one, which when you look at some of the other matchups in that tournament, you're like, that's that's a pretty favorable start to the tournament. But yeah, I know you won't be there because you're always conflicts with football season and the state game in particular. But again, I think
I've already hired someone to cover it. We have a stringer that will cover it for us. But yeah, they play at Hawaii on that trip. They play 4 games on that trip. They play at Hawaii the night before Boston College in football. I will be in Chestnut Hill for football. Mm-hmm. And then I'm not going to Maui because that's the week of the NC State football game. I have to make that a priority, given the time of year and everything. But there's no easy ones out there. That day opening with Dayton is very difficult. Dayton's a good program. And actually, it would be cool to see Carolina play at Dayton. That's an awesome building. They always fill it up, too. And that whole bracket's tough. I mean, the fact that UConn has to open with Memphis.
I know.
That's wild, man. That's just a beefy tournament. Then they've got Auburn or Iowa State next. That's a great field.
Tough.
I mean, Michigan State's in that field. They're like, oh, yeah, Michigan State's in there, too.
It's like, yeah, that's pretty good, too, right?
Yeah, pretty good field. Yeah. So we're going to get the conference schedule soon. I don't know why they hold it out so long. Why would you want to do that when everybody's in full football mode now? It doesn't make any sense. They'll
put it out the most inopportune time. They'll probably put it out at like halftime of a football game or something.
But there's a lot of things about this league that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but you may be doing a drop about sometime soon, maybe.
Right now, if I go in my car and turn on the ACC radio network, it'll be like women's volleyball preview.
Yeah, and it's like no disrespect.
But if I go to the SEC network or the Big Ten network, all college football.
Yeah, of course.
I haven't heard any. I'm teasing. I haven't heard any college football other than a couple of replays of games, which is a waste of time.
Yeah.
All this month. And I listen. I turn that channel on every time I go to Chapel Hill. Every time I come back,
it's not like you're listening to it at 3 a.m. in the morning.
I've been at Chapel Hill 13 times this month for interviews and
at least, probably.
And I've not once heard 1 minute of college football talk on the ACC radio network.
That's insane, man. It really is.
Soccer, more women's soccer preview, and now they're doing volleyball stuff. Unbelievable. Like the Cal women's soccer coach for 15 minutes.
Again, it's like no disrespect to these programs, but I just don't really.
No disrespect to them at all, but that's just stupid product.
Yeah, it just doesn't. It's not the product people want to hear when you're a week away from football season starting. I mean, it just is a no-brainer to maybe talk about football. I don't know. But what do we know, AJ? What do we know about?
How many people do you think listen to that whole 15 minutes and thought, man, that's interesting. That's good stuff.
Yeah, like, man, I really, really needed to know about the Cal women's soccer team, man. I really was interested in knowing about that. Yeah, again, it's just not relevant content, but maybe AJ will do a drop on that at some point and he can rant for 10, 15 minutes about why it doesn't make any sense. But again, another time for another day. Besides this UNC basketball show. But I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another quick edition of the UNC basketball show. I think we still went about 30 or so minutes. So plenty of stuff to talk about in this one. 60% off 1-year sub at THI, $330 a month, ends Friday night. Use the promo code Kickoff 2024. All that stuff's going to be in the description, or you can just shoot us a Venmo if you want to do it that way to support the channel at Tar Heel Illustrated. That link is below as well. If you're excited about basketball season, about the roster, and about what this team could do, go ahead and like the video below. I expect over 100 likes on any basketball stuff we put out minimum, man, because I know this, we always talk and joke about it, but the basketball view counter versus football view counter is quite different 365 days a year. So anytime we put basketball, I'm asking 100 minimum, and we struggle to get that in football with likes, so shouldn't have a problem doing that with basketball. I
think the Claude Commitment podcast has like 400 or 500 likes on it.
Over 10,000 views. I think it's amazing what a 10-minute commitment podcast on a guy that half the fan base didn't like anyway can do, isn't it?
Didn't know who he was. 95% of the people that criticized him didn't know who the hell he was before.
Yeah, man, that was all over my Twitter. All I got was responses like, I don't want to say he wasn't like, who cares, but it was just very underwhelming responses. And I'm like,
why did they get a 7-footer?
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, let's go get it. Who?
Yeah, there's like 14 of them still holding out, right?
Yeah, just come on, man. It's got to be better there, guys. But again, if you want to hear more about that, go listen to AJ's Commitment podcast, because again, that goes a lot more in depth on why and what he brings to the team. But appreciate you guys watching as always. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks.